Who's your emergency contact? Who should we notify in the case of death? Welcome to the USP, where I've spent the last 2+ decades of my life. In a prior episode, I shared with you when my homeboy Rith beat up the guard, Marquez, knocked him out 3 times. For that, they locked me and Dana up in a shoe on a timeout because they felt that we were individuals with influence over our homies. But as I told them, I have a hard enough time doing my own time. I can't worry about and dictate how other people do their time. I make it really simple for us over there. Don't run up any bills you can't pay. Make sure your paperwork check out. And really, don't be a douchebag. I never knew how much conflict and politics and just dumb shit that goes on with everybody on a daily basis. For some reason, we had a representative on our side, this Filipino dude named Silva. And everything is supposed to go through him. When somebody has an issue, they're supposed to go and ask him for advice and bring it to him and let him figure it out. But somehow on the east side, every time one of the homies have an issue, they keep coming to me and I have to mediate whatever it is that's going on. And it just, beyond my understanding, how much drama it is being inside a penitentiary. Really, for me, it's quite simple. Conduct yourself a certain way, be respectful. If something comes up, deal with it. So me and Dana, we're in the shoe. And we're in the shoe because they held us responsible for the stuff that was going on with the homies on the yard. But while I was in the shoe, I got to know Dana. This is the first time me and him ever really been in a confined space and actually had conversations. Because usually when I'm on the yard, he's doing his thing. I'm on the poker table. If I'm not on the poker table running the game, I'm playing handball or basketball or whatever else it is that I'm doing. So when they throw me and Dana in the cell, like I told you, all these old timers that has been around, they're automatically on a subconscious level operate on a position of security. So when he comes in, he tells me, hey, well, since I have seniority, being the elder, do I get to pick what bunk I want to, can I pick the bunk first? I say, yeah, pick whatever bunk you want, top or bottom. And right away, he said he wanted the top bunk. And I've told you why people want the top bunk. When you're in a top bunk, it's harder for your cellie, if there's beef with you, to sneak up on you on the top bunk, as opposed if you're just on the bottom bunk. Dana, he was a state prisoner. They contracted him to the state, to the feds, because they felt that housing him in Hawaii would be problematic because he had a lot of influence. In his own right, he was a legend. All the Hawaiians on the Atwater that was there or that grew up, they all heard of Dana. Now, if I can remember correctly, he was in federal prison, or he was in a state prison for 2 murders. And the incident that happened was there was supposed to have been 2 people that was set to testify against his brother or somebody that he knew, one of his associates. And I don't know how the state prison is set up or exactly what prison he was housed in, but he escaped from the prison, went and killed these 2 witnesses. And then he got charged for murder. But his whole time, he thought he was in there for 2 first-degree murder. and he thought he had a life sentence. When I ran into him, his brother that was housed in the state in Arizona had went back to court and had wrote him, say, hey, man, there's laws and stuff that's coming down that says we should be home. And that his actual case was 2 second-degree murder instead of a first degree, which only carry a maximum of 30 years. But the time that I met him, he's already been in there 35 years. And the feds and the state was in negotiation to renew his contract. And I read his contract because while we were in the SHU, we talked about it. And when we came out of the SHU, he gave me some of the paperwork because he was trying to get me to get my lawyer to file a lawsuit against the feds and the state for illegally housing him. Well, the new contract for the feds was the state wanted to pay the federal government to house him for another 30 years. But the federal government was in dispute because they wanted the state to sign a contract to house him for another 100 years. Now think about this. This man had 2 second-degree murder, which is a max of 30 years. But he's already been in there 35 years at the time that I met him. And this was in 2008, 2009 when we had this conversation. They know this man, time is up. But because he's been in the system for so long, been conditioned, what's that mentality called? He's institutionalized already. When he first came in, he was young, and he already thought that he was never going home. So he never looked up his case. He never fought his case until he got a letter from his brother in 2009, letting him know that, hey, we're supposed to be home. But still, the courts didn't notify him that, hey, your time is up. You're up for parole. They just threw him to the feds and forgot about him, and it was in negotiation to house him for another 100 years. You know, through the grace of God, he's home now, but not really. He's in a facility in Hawaii where he can leave to go to work and maybe go family functions, have weekend passes, but he has to return to the prison every night. So he ended up having a life sentence in the state, being in a facility where he can leave, but being housed in a system, in a prison, in whatever they call it, because they feel that he's a dangerous individual. Now, when I met him, he was burnt out. You know, if anybody that have a conversation with him can see that all the light bulbs aren't lit up in there. But he's an old convict. He grew up in the system when they first started flooding the federal system with gang members. You know, he grew up, he was there when those guys that started the Black Hand was there. When the people that started the AB, the California brand, was there. So these are the people that he grew up with and became friends with. And through the course of time, people looked at him as he's one of the big homies too. And when he was in Victorville, they gave him that respect and treated him as he was one of the big homies. But like with us, with the Asian Islanders, we don't have a big homie. One, we're all different races. We all come from different gangs on the streets, different organizations. So we don't have somebody that is nominated to be, the law, whatever. When you're a big homie, as far as like the Black Hand goes, as far as the brand goes, they're the law on the yard. Whatever they say goes, and everybody pays them tributes. Everybody that's within that's under their umbrella. So we had a little, conflict, a little static because he thought he was this individual, but we as the homies didn't recognize him as that. Not to say that we didn't respect him for being an elder, respect him for being a G and the time that he's done, but we just don't structure ourselves that way. So, through the course of our time being in the shoe, we was together for like 3 weeks. When I came out, the homie's like, man, how could you have Stan being in the cell with Dana for 3 weeks? Because, he's, like I said, he's burnt out. He's set in his ways, and, sometimes he's too brash, too aggressive for some of the homies, and they feel some type of way about it. But me and Dana, we develop a rapport, through our interaction, through the few times that we bumped heads. But we had an understanding, and, I always say men recognize men. So we had a meeting of the minds. So while we're in the cell, he tells me a little bit about his story, about how he ended up the way he is at this time. Like, he recognized that he's not all there anymore. And the part and what changed him was, I think he was in either Lewisburg or Leavenworth. Now, you have to remember back then, the penitentiaries didn't have cameras all around the yard like they do now. Now, when you walk into a unit, there's cameras, there's metal detectors at every door, there's cameras, dozens of cameras all throughout the yard. There's rarely any more blind spots. But back then, there was no cameras. And the violent level, even though through the course of my time, I thought the violent level was on a 10. But if it was on a 10 during the course of my time, it was like a 20 for the generations before me. I had a comment on a couple guys that's been in the system that was there during the 80s and the 90s, and they made it home. And I was fortunate I made it home at this time, but back then, Bloody Beaumont was a regular. It was custom. It was expected. It was an everyday routine throughout every penitentiary in the U.S., in the federal system. So whether he was in Lewisburg or Leavenworth, I can't exactly remember. I just know it starts with an L. But an incident happened where somebody came up dead. Like I said, back then, 90% of the population in the prison lived by that code, the code of silence. If it don't have nothing to do with you, you keep walking, you mind your business. When you see somebody butchering somebody, you better leave the scene, because those people that's butchering somebody, if they look up and they see that you're watching, well, they're gonna come and butcher you too. Because like I said, back then they didn't have no cameras. So the only way for them to convict somebody is if they have an eyewitness. And if there's 2 people or however many people doing whatever they're doing, and you're a potential witness, even if you're not, even if you just walk by the scene and accidentally look, they might feel that you might be a potential witness and come and butcher you. Somebody comment on like how crazy it is to have had, when I told a story about Uwe and how he went into a cell with his Hawaiian dude, and they had a knife fight in the cell, and Uwe came out and the Hawaiian dude died. But those type of things were regular back then. The rules when I came into the prison system, the stories that was told to me by these old heads was real simple. Don't ever pull a knife out on somebody if you're not going to use it. If you pull it out, you better use it. Because if you pull it out and don't use it, They're going to just think that you're pump faking. And now they're going to come and butcher you. Your own people's going to butcher you because you pulled a knife out and you didn't do anything with it. So they thinking you're faking or you're, whatever it is a no-no. Another thing, if you're in a conflict, in a confrontation, and you guys are stabbing, and you're stabbing someone, once you start stabbing someone, you better not stop. The rules is you don't stop until the guy is dead or until the CO breaks it up. You know, it's a warrior mentality back then. When you come in, everybody's expected to have a knife. You better learn how to make one. You better learn how to cut your freaking bunk. You better learn how to cut your shelves. And you cut it with your nail clippers. So, yeah, think about that. You're scraping, you're taking your stainless steel nail clipper, you break it up, and you're drawing a groove in there, and you're going back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, until that freaking metal is cut. It takes a minute. But people, through the course of time, perfected techniques to cut down their time to cutting through the bunk. I've done it. Anybody that's in the penitentiaries knows how to do it. You have to. That's part of your survival skills. So, how Dana came to the state of mind that he was, because, you know, being on the yard with him, he was real athletic. You know, he played softball, he played football. He didn't participate in any of the sports with us, but when we're just hanging out doing homie time, I can see that he was really athletic. And I asked him, I said, hey, when you get out, why don't you play softball on my team? I see you got little skills. You know, you can play shortstop or whatever position that he wanted to play because he was an athlete. But he told me that, you know, he wanted to play sports and participate more with the homies and their activities, but up here, it doesn't all click right. You know, when you see him, you see he's normal. But really what's normal when you're around, you know, when the whole yard is crazy, crazy becomes normal. So I didn't really see that he was off in the head, but he knows himself. He knew what he used to be when he first came into the system and what the system, the condition that he was in, has done to him mentally. And he acknowledged it. You know, when he was in like I say, whether it was Lewisburg or Leavenworth, somebody came up dead. And they didn't have any witnesses. They didn't have any cameras. But he was a suspect in that incident. So they locked him up in the shoe. And in the shoe that he had was next to a pipe. You know, because back then in the old prison, you didn't have heaters and air conditioners. You had, you know, for heating, you had them steam pipes. So when them steam pipe heats up, it pops. You know, I was just there in Lewisburg just a few years back. And you can hear the steam pipe popping. Pop, 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 whatever. However, sometimes it's loud, sometimes it's not, but it's constant. So he told me that they had him in a cell in the back by the steam pipe. And they kept him there for 2 years. And through the course of the 2 years, it was just a constant noise that kept him from being able to sleep. You know, he tried earplugs. He tried all sorts of different things to drown out these noise, but it couldn't. You know, you guys hear of Chinese torture. You know, they put you under the water and the faucet is not turned on where the water is drowning you is just a drop at a time. Bloop. Hitting you in the forehead, rolling down by your eyes. It's a drop at a time. Maybe the span is 30 seconds, a minute, or 2 minutes. But that in itself is not torture. What is torture is the duration that they do that to you. So put yourself in his position, in his place, in a cell, in a shoe, in the back where you can't communicate with anybody. Got you in a room where the pipes are popping and creaking, depriving you of sleep for 2 years straight. You know, professionals tell you after 6 months, we all can be diagnosed with PTSD. So imagine what happens to an individual if they've been in there for 30 plus years, in an environment where it's violent, in an environment where it's hostile. Your nerves are always on edge. Your senses is always heightened. Every time you hear footsteps running, chairs being dragged, or keys jingling, you get a burst of energy, of adrenaline pumping through your body. Even if you know that has nothing to do with you, your body's already been conditioned to associate these things, these sounds, with negativity. So your defense mechanism sets up. The adrenaline bursts through your body to be able to give you the strength and the energy to defend yourself or to act. But being in a condition when you're always being shot with that burst of, what's it called again? Adrenaline. That's got to be, one, I don't know if you have an unlimited supply of that, but two, that has to be unhealthy for you and your psyche to be able to go through that and have those hormones being injected into your body on a constant basis. You know, I don't sleep much out here either. And, you know, every time I sleep, I'm having a repetitive dream where I'm still in prison. And it pissed me off because, you know, in my dream, I know I'm supposed to be home, but I'm wondering why I'm still stuck here. And, you know, I don't dream about ghosts and demons and all the other stuff. But in essence, those dreams that I have of still being confined in a cell, of still being stuck behind a wall, can be considered a nightmare for me. Because I'll wake up in a sweat. I'll wake up mad and frustrated, and really frustrated because I can't seem to get my mind, my mental state away from it. You know, I don't really know where the direction that I was taking this episode. But it's just to let you guys know that, you know, if you have friends and families that's been incarcerated for decades and they come home and maybe their behavior doesn't fit in with what's going on in society, you know, don't be upset. Don't be mad. Have patience with them. You know, us, we pride ourselves in thinking that we haven't been affected, in believing that we haven't allowed these situations, these environments, you know, the system, the condition that we've been in for the last multiple decades affect us. You know, our pride and our ego don't allow us to acknowledge that. But I'm here to tell you from first-hand experience that there's no way that anyone that has done the time that I've done, or half the time that I've done, can come home unaffected. So like I said, if you have friends, families, members, anybody that you know that's been in this system, that's been in these conditions for all these years, be patient with them. They're not going to share what's going on in their head. You know, it's not your place to ask. But when this time comes, when they want to speak, don't be judgmental and just listen. Because it's not easy surviving out here. And I'm not even talking about the financial situations or the everyday grind, but just trying to get your head wrapped around all the different environment that you are not accustomed to. You know, yeah, I'm sorry it's a little somber, but welcome to the USP.